You're right. Here's a tighter, punchier intro with a harder hook and clear keywords baked in, still smooth for narration. The truth is brutal. If someone can make you angry, they can control you. A sentence, a glance, a delay in traffic, a disrespectful comment, a rude coworker, a family argument, and suddenly your mood is gone, your focus is gone, your day is hijacked. That's not emotion. That's vulnerability. That's your peace being held hostage by people who don't deserve access to your mind. And here's the part most people miss. Anger doesn't punish them. It punishes you. Seneca warned that anger is a kind of self-destruction. It hits you first, then it hits everything around you. Marcus Aurelius kept repeating the same idea in different ways. The event isn't the problem, your judgment is. Epictetus made it even simpler. It's not what happens that disturbs you, it's the meaning you attach to it. So in this episode, we're going to build real emotional control using Stoicism. Not motivation, not good vibes, not fake calm. A practical system you can use in the moment to stop getting bothered, stop reacting, stop losing your power, and start choosing your response like a disciplined person. You'll learn how to pause before you react, how to delete the story that creates anger, how to handle disrespect without becoming weak, and how to train a mind that stays calm under pressure. If you want a life where nobody can push your buttons, you have to remove the buttons. Let's do it. 1. The agreement that creates anger. If you want to become the kind of person who is never again angry or bothered by anyone, you have to start with a truth that feels uncomfortable at first. Anger is not just an emotion you catch from other people. It's an agreement you make inside your own mind. Something happens, and in a fraction of a second, you silently sign a contract that says, "This is unacceptable. This is personal. This is disrespect. This must be punished." That contract is the moment your peace leaves the room. And what Stoicism teaches, with almost surgical clarity, is that the event didn't force your anger. Your judgment about the event did. Epictetus makes this the foundation. It's not things themselves that disturb us, but the opinions we form about them. That's not a motivational line. It's a diagnosis. Because if anger comes from the outside, then you're helpless. But if anger comes from your interpretation, then you're powerful again. Because interpretations can be questioned, edited, or rejected. This is why Marcus Aurelius kept returning to the same idea in different forms, almost like he was training himself every day. Remove the judgment, and the complaint disappears. Remove the complaint, and the feeling of harm collapses. In other words, the instant you stop calling it harm, it stops functioning as harm inside you. Think about a simple moment. Someone cuts you off in traffic. The raw fact is just motion. A car moved into your lane. That's it. But the anger doesn't arrive until the story arrives. He disrespected me. People are idiots. This always happens to me. I should teach him a lesson. That story turns neutral reality into a personal attack, and now your nervous system is lit up as if you've been threatened. Or imagine a coworker speaks to you with a sharp tone. The sound waves hit your ears, but the anger doesn't ignite until your mind adds meaning. She thinks she's above me. I'm being treated like I'm nothing. I can't let this slide. The meaning is the match. Without it, there's no fire. So the first skill, the first discipline, is to catch the agreement before it becomes your mood. Not by suppressing your feelings, but by interrogating the story you're about to believe. When something triggers you today, try this. Pause for a breath and ask yourself very plainly, what exactly am I calling this? Am I calling it disrespect? Am I calling it an attack? Am I calling it humiliation? Am I calling it unfair? And then ask the Stoic question that changes everything. Is that the only true description, or is it just the most emotional one? Because the moment you can offer a simpler description, a person is rushing, a person is stressed, a person spoke poorly, a plan changed, a delay happened. You remove the poison from the event. You don't excuse bad behavior. You just refuse to crown it with control over your inner world. Here's the practical move to lock this in. Every time you feel anger rising, reduce the event to a neutral sentence that a camera could record. Not what it means, not what it says about you, just what happened. He interrupted me. She didn't respond. They criticized my work. The meeting got moved. Then watch what happens. Your mind will try to add its usual dramatic subtitle, the insult, the disrespect, the personal attack. And your job is to refuse to sign that contract. You can still take action later. You can still set a boundary. You can still correct someone. But you'll do it from clarity, not from heat. And if you want a simple challenge for today, the kind that actually changes you, the next time something tries to bother you, don't ask, "How do I calm down?" Ask, "What story am I about to believe?" Because the moment you control the story, you control the emotion. And that's where real freedom starts. 2. What belongs to you and what never will. Here's where Stoicism becomes less like philosophy and more like a weapon you carry in your pocket. Most anger comes from trying to own what can never be owned. You try to own people's behavior. You try to own outcomes. You try to own how fast life should move, how fair it should be, how respectful strangers should act, how smoothly technology should work, how perfectly your plans should unfold. And when reality refuses to obey, you feel insulted by existence itself. That insult becomes anger. Epictetus cuts through all of it with one foundational line: some things are up to you, and some things are not. And I want you to hear that not as a calm quote you nod at, but as a dividing line that decides whether your day is peaceful or violent inside. Because the moment you confuse those two categories, you suffer on purpose. You start demanding that the outside world behave like it's your mind. You start acting like life owes you cooperation. And when it doesn't deliver, you call that frustration. But it's really entitlement in disguise. Not spoiled entitlement, but the subtle entitlement of expecting reality to match your preferences. So let's make it extremely practical. What belongs to you is your judgment, your choice, your attitude, your next action. That's it. Not your reputation, not your relationship outcome, not whether they apologize, not whether the traffic opens, not whether your message is understood, not whether your boss is fair, not whether a stranger is polite. Those things are external. They can influence you, but they do not belong to you. And if something doesn't belong to you, it cannot truly injure you unless you hand it permission. This is why anger is such a clear signal that you've crossed the boundary. The moment you feel it, you can almost always find the hidden demand underneath it. They shouldn't talk to me like that. This shouldn't be happening. People shouldn't be so stupid. I shouldn't be disrespected. And I agree with you morally. People shouldn't be rude, shouldn't be careless, shouldn't be dishonest. But Stoicism is asking a different question, a more strategic question. Even if they shouldn't, are they under your control? If the answer is no, then anger is not strength. Anger is wasted energy aimed at the wrong target. Marcus Aurelius trained himself to see this constantly. When he says that if you are distressed by anything external, the pain isn't due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, he's pointing to the same boundary. You're suffering because you're treating the external as if it has authority over your inner world. You're giving it a vote inside your mind, and the Stoic move is to revoke that vote. Now here's the part that makes this lesson feel like power instead of passivity. This isn't telling you to accept bad behavior. It's telling you to relocate your power to the only place it can actually live. You can correct someone without anger. You can leave without rage. You can enforce a boundary without losing your dignity. You can take action without handing your nervous system to the situation. Try this mental switch the next time you're bothered. When you feel the heat rising, ask one clean question. Is this mine to command? If it's not, if it's a person's mood, a delay, a mistake, a random inconvenience, a comment from someone you can't control, then immediately follow with a second question. So what is mine right now? And the answer will always be something like, my breathing, my tone, my decision, my next step. That's where your authority is. That's where your freedom is. That's where the adult version of you lives. A simple example, someone speaks to you disrespectfully. You cannot control their mouth. You cannot control the fact that they chose to be rude. But you can control whether you respond like a stable person or like a triggered person. You can control whether you clarify calmly, whether you end the conversation, whether you walk away, whether you let it pass because it's not worth your attention. You can even control whether you deal with it later when you're calm, which is often the smartest move. That's not weakness, that's leadership of the self. So here's the challenge for today, and it's deceptively simple. The moment you feel yourself getting angry, don't argue with the emotion. Don't shame yourself. Just sort the situation into two piles. What's mine, what's not. Then put your energy only into the mine pile. Because the more you practice this, the more you'll notice something almost shocking. People can still be annoying, unfair, disrespectful, unpredictable, but they stop being able to move you. And when nothing outside you can move you without permission, you're not just calm, you're free. 3. The Stoic pause that makes you unbreakable. There's a single moment in every situation that decides whether you stay powerful or you lose yourself, and it's not the insult, not the delay, not the disrespect, not the rude tone. It's the tiny gap right after it happens, the gap where your mind reaches for a meaning, and your body reaches for a reaction, and you're standing there for a split second with two futures in front of you. In one future, you react instantly, you speak too fast, you type too fast, you raise your voice, you sharpen your words, you let your ego drive, and the situation now owns you. In the other future, you pause, you look at what's happening like a craftsman, you keep your dignity, and you choose your response like a person who is not available for chaos. That gap is where freedom lives. Epictetus gives you the blueprint for that gap when he talks about impressions. Life throws an impression at you, a sound, a look, a message, an inconvenience, and your mind immediately tries to label it bad, unfair, disrespect, danger, attack. And the Stoic discipline is simple but difficult. Don't accept the first label. Don't swallow the impression whole. Treat it like a stranger knocking on your door. You don't have to let it in. You can stand there and ask, "What are you?" and "Do you deserve access to my inner world?" This is why the Stoics were obsessed with delay. Seneca, in his writing on anger, keeps coming back to the idea that the first impulse is not yet a crime, it's a spark. But if you feed it, it becomes a fire that burns you. The goal isn't to pretend you never feel the spark. The goal is to become the kind of person who does not immediately pour gasoline on it. And Marcus Aurelius lived this in practice. He trained himself to slow down his internal judgment, to see the event plainly, to not let the first wave of emotion decide the story of the day. So, here's the technique. And I want it to be so simple, you can actually use it when your heart is racing. When something happens that normally bothers you, you do nothing for 3 seconds. Not because 3 seconds is magical, but because 3 seconds is long enough for you to step back into reason. Long enough for you to remember, I don't have to answer this the way my old self answers. Long enough to let the adult part of you take the wheel. And during those 3 seconds, you do one thing. You name the impression, not the situation, the impression inside you. You say silently, this is irritation. This is ego. This is the need to be right. This is the fear of being disrespected. That naming is not psychology fluff. It's a control lever. Because once you can name it, you can separate from it. You stop being the emotion, and you become the observer of the emotion. You stop being angry, and you become someone noticing anger rising. That difference sounds small, but it changes everything. It gives you space. It gives you options. Now let's make it real. Someone sends you a message that feels disrespectful. Your fingers want to respond immediately. Your mind starts writing a reply that's sharp, humiliating, final. The Stoic pause says, wait, 3 seconds. Exhale slowly once, longer than you inhale, because your breath is the fastest way to tell your nervous system, we're not in danger. Then ask yourself one question that cuts through the drama. What response will I respect in the morning? Not, what response will win? Not, what response will hurt them back? But what response will you respect when the heat is gone and you're alone with your conscience? This question is how you recruit your future self to save you from your present impulse. And here's the deeper reason this works. Anger thrives on speed. The faster you move, the less you think. The less you think, the more you become predictable. And predictable people are easy to manipulate. If someone knows they can trigger you into a reaction, they can steer you. That's why the pause is not just a calming technique. It's a refusal to be controlled. But let me add one important clarification, so you don't mishear the message. The pause doesn't mean you let things slide. It means you choose the right kind of strength. Sometimes the right response is silence. Sometimes it's a calm boundary. Sometimes it's a simple sentence like, "Don't speak to me like that," delivered without heat. Sometimes it's walking away. Sometimes it's dealing with it later, when you can think clearly. The point is not what you choose. The point is that you choose, instead of being chosen for. So here's the challenge for today, and it's the kind that changes your whole temperament if you actually do it. The next time you feel bothered, take the 3-second pause before you speak, before you reply, before you react. And in that pause, name the impression and ask, what response will I respect tomorrow? Because every time you do that, you are training your nervous system to associate triggers with clarity instead of chaos. You're building a mind that doesn't rush into emotional debt, and slowly, something shifts. People can still be difficult. Life can still be messy. But you stop being easy to provoke. You stop being easy to pull off center. You become the kind of person who can feel the spark and still keep the fire in check. And that's not just calm. That's mastery. 4. Deconstruct the judgment, and the anger collapses. Most people think the trigger is the trigger, the insult is the insult, the delay is the delay, the disrespect is the disrespect. But Stoicism keeps pointing to something colder and more liberating. The trigger is not what happened. The trigger is what you decided it meant. Anger is rarely caused by the event itself. Anger is caused by the verdict you place on the event, the label you stamp onto it, the story you attach to it in the first second. And the reason this matters is simple. You can't always change what happens, but you can always challenge the verdict. Marcus Aurelius has a line that's basically a master key for emotional control. Remove the opinion, and you remove the complaint. Remove the complaint, and the feeling of being harmed begins to disappear. That's not him trying to sound poetic. That's him reminding himself that the mind is the place where pain becomes personal. The outside world throws a scene at you, and your mind writes the script, and then your body performs it. So, if you want to stop the performance, you don't start by wrestling the body. You start by rewriting the script. Let's make it painfully practical. Someone cuts you off in traffic. The raw reality is boring. A car changed lanes. That's it. But your mind adds a courtroom speech. He disrespected me. People are reckless. This always happens to me. I should teach him a lesson. And notice what those sentences have in common. They're not facts. They're interpretations. They're emotional subtitles. And once you see that, you realize something almost funny. You weren't angry at a lane change. You were angry at your own narration. Or think about a different kind of moment, the one that really gets people. Someone looks at you a certain way, speaks to you in a tone, ignores your message, doesn't acknowledge your effort. The event is small, but the meaning you attach to it is huge. They think I'm nothing. They're trying to embarrass me. They're playing games. And now anger shows up, not because you discovered truth, but because you declared meaning without proof. You acted like your interpretation was a fact. Stoicism doesn't ask you to be naive. It asks you to be precise. Precision is peace. So here's the technique that makes this lesson real in your hands, and it's so simple that it almost feels too simple until you try it. When you feel anger rising, force yourself to say 2 sentences out loud if you can, or silently if you're around people. The first sentence must be camera truth, like a reporter describing what happened without drama. He raised his voice. She interrupted me. The meeting got moved. The package arrived late. He criticized my work. No motive, no meaning, just what happened. Then the second sentence is the story your mind is trying to glue onto it. He's disrespecting me. She thinks she's superior. They don't value me. Life is against me. And when you split it like that, something changes immediately, because you can finally see what you've been doing. You've been reacting to the second sentence as if it were reality. Now you get to choose. You can keep the story if it's actually true and useful, but most of the time, the story is either exaggerated, unprovable, or unnecessary. And that's where the power lives. You replace the story with a cleaner interpretation that doesn't poison your nervous system. Not an optimistic lie, just a calmer possibility. Maybe they're stressed. Maybe they're careless. Maybe they're having a bad day. Maybe they didn't think. Even better, you can replace it with a Stoic statement that protects your mind. This is annoying, not dangerous. This is inconvenient, not personal. This is their behavior, not my identity. Those sentences don't make you weak. They make you unhooked. And there's an even deeper move here that turns this into a long-term change instead of a one-time trick. Ask yourself, in the heat of the moment, what exactly is the injury? Not the emotion, not the insult. What is the actual injury? Did you lose your character? Did you lose your ability to choose? Did you lose your values? Or did you simply feel a sting to your ego, a bruise to an image you want to protect? Because a lot of anger is just ego pain pretending to be justice. When you expose that, it softens. You don't have to hate yourself for it, you just have to see it clearly. So here's the challenge for today. The next time you feel bothered, don't fight the feeling. Don't justify it either. Separate the event from the story in real time. Give the event one plain sentence, then identify the story sentence, and then choose whether you want to keep paying for that story with your piece. Because once you master this, your life starts to change in a quiet way that's hard to explain to people who still live inside their reactions. The world can still be messy. People can still be irritating. Plans can still break. But you stop taking everything personally. And that's when you stop being easy to control. 5. Manage expectations, and you remove the surprise that feeds anger. A lot of anger isn't about the size of the problem. It's about the shock of it. It's the moment you think, this shouldn't be happening, and your mind treats reality like an insult. That shock is what turns a small inconvenience into a full emotional takeover. And if you really look closely, you'll see the pattern everywhere. You expected the road to be clear, the person to be reasonable, the message to be understood, the plan to go smoothly, the day to be fair. Then life does what life does. It introduces friction, and you interpret that friction as a violation. Seneca understood this deeply. On Anger, he keeps circling one core idea. Anger is not just a reaction, it's a failure of preparation. You weren't ready for human nature. You weren't ready for delays. You weren't ready for mistakes. So when they arrive, as they always will, you respond as if something unnatural has happened, as if the universe broke the rules, when the truth is simpler. You forgot what kind of world you live in. Marcus Aurelius didn't forget. That's why he wrote one of the most practical morning reminders ever put on paper. He tells himself that today he will meet the meddlesome, the ungrateful, the arrogant, the deceitful, not because he was bitter, and not because he enjoyed expecting the worst, but because he refused to be surprised by what is normal. He was doing mental training. He was rehearsing reality. And when you rehearse reality, you don't waste energy being offended by it. You walk into the day like a person who already knows the terrain. This is where most people misunderstand Stoicism. They think it's about lowering standards. It's not. It's about removing fantasy. You can still want people to be respectful. You can still value kindness. You can still build a life around high character. But you stop requiring the world to meet your standards before you can stay calm. You stop acting like fairness is guaranteed. You stop acting like other people are obligated to be mature. And that shift alone removes so much anger that it almost feels like you've changed environments, when really you've changed your expectations. Now, there's a fine line here, and it matters. Some people here expect people to be difficult, and they become cynical, suspicious, cold. That's not what we're doing. Cynicism is a kind of bitterness. It's still emotional dependence, just dressed up as realism. Stoic expectation is different. It's quiet readiness. It's saying, I know what human beings are capable of, so I won't be shocked. I will be prepared. And because I'm prepared, I can respond with skill instead of heat. And this is incredibly practical in daily life. If you expect traffic to be perfect, you'll rage when it's not. If you expect every conversation to be smooth, you'll get angry when someone is awkward or rude. If you expect people to read your mind, you'll explode when they misunderstand you. If you expect life to reward effort instantly, you'll become resentful when results take time. In every case, the anger is not coming from reality. It's coming from the gap between reality and your fantasy of reality. So the discipline here is to shrink that gap on purpose, not by hoping less, but by expecting friction as part of the path. And the moment you do that, you gain something almost unfair. You stop wasting energy on surprise. You stop feeding the emotion with disbelief. You start dealing with the situation as it is. Here's a simple practice you can adopt immediately, and it takes less than a minute. At the start of your day, before your phone, before messages, before the noise, quietly tell yourself a short version of Marcus's reminder in your own words. Today, I'll meet delays. I'll meet rude people. I'll meet misunderstandings. I'll meet something that tests my patience. Then add one final line that makes it personal. And I will not be surprised. That sentence is armor. Not hard armor, calm armor. It doesn't make you cold. It makes you steady. And when something happens later, you'll notice the difference. Instead of thinking, unbelievable, you'll think, of course. Not of course in a defeated way, but of course in a prepared way. Like a trained person stepping onto the field. The situation might still be inconvenient. You might still correct it. You might still set a boundary. But you won't donate your peace to the shock. So here's the challenge for today. Stop demanding a smooth life as the price of your calm. Expect friction, expect human flaws, expect delays, and then practice responding with the mindset of someone who came ready. Because when anger loses the element of surprise, it loses most of its power. And what replaces it is something rare. Quiet control. 6. Compassion without weakness. See the ignorance. Keep your power. There's a moment in every anger episode where people secretly worry, okay, but what if the other person really is wrong? What if they're rude on purpose? What if they're unfair? What if they're trying to provoke me? And this is where Stoicism gives you one of its most disarming moves, because it doesn't ask you to pretend the world is kind. It asks you to stop treating other people's flaws like they're instructions for how you should behave. The old Socratic idea that the Stoics inherited is simple and sharp. People do wrong out of ignorance. Not ignorance like they don't know basic facts, but ignorance of what's truly good, what's truly worth it, what kind of person they're becoming with each action. In that frame, the person who insults you isn't powerful. They're undisciplined. The person who lies isn't clever. They're desperate. The person who tries to humiliate you isn't above you. They're showing you how little inner control they have. And when you see it like that, anger starts to look less like justice and more like a trap. Because why would you set your nervous system on fire over someone who's already failing at self-control? Marcus Aurelius has a way of bringing this down to earth. He reminds himself that when someone acts badly, they're mistaken about what's good and what's bad, and that he shares the same human nature as them, which means he can respond like a human being, not like a wound. That's not sentimental, that's strategy. Because the moment you label someone as a villain, your ego gears up for war, and war is expensive. But if you label them as untrained, confused, ruled by impulse, you stay calm enough to choose the right response. Now, let's be clear, because this is where people mishear compassion and accidentally become doormats. Compassion does not mean access. Compassion does not mean closeness. Compassion does not mean you keep them in your life. Compassion means you don't let their broken behavior drag you into becoming broken too. You can see their ignorance and still enforce a boundary. You can feel pity and still say no. You can understand and still walk away. The Stoic win is not be nice. The Stoic win is stay sovereign. Here's how this looks in real life. Someone speaks to you with disrespect. Your old self hears, "They're attacking me," and you rush to defend your status. Your disciplined self hears, "This person is ruled by impulse," and you respond with calm firmness. You either correct it simply, or you end the interaction, or you disengage, but you don't take the bait. Because once you take the bait, you're no longer solving the situation. You're feeding a need to prove something, and the need to prove something is one of the fastest ways to lose your peace. So the practice in this lesson is a mental substitution, and it's powerful because it changes the emotion without changing the facts. When you feel anger rising, replace one thought. Replace "how dare they" with "how untrained." Replace "they're evil" with "they're confused." Replace "they're doing this to me" with "they're showing me who they are." That shift doesn't excuse what happened. It just stops you from making it personal. And the more you stop making things personal, the less you become emotionally available for chaos. There's also a deeper layer here that quietly kills resentment. When you get angry, it often means you expected the person to be better than they are. You expected maturity, you expected fairness, you expected self-awareness. And that expectation is what gets violated. But once you see their limitations clearly, you stop demanding fruit from a dead tree. You stop negotiating with reality. You stop being shocked that a person who lacks control acts like a person who lacks control. And that realism gives you peace. If you want a practical, in-the-moment move, do this. The next time someone provokes you, imagine you're watching a short documentary about human behavior, not starring in a drama about your ego. You don't have to narrate it out loud. Just internally shift to observer mode for one breath and say, "This is what impulsiveness looks like," or "This is what insecurity looks like," or "This is what lack of discipline looks like." That one sentence pulls you out of the emotional quicksand. It makes the situation informational again, and once it's informational, you can respond intelligently. And the challenge for today is simple but not easy. The next time someone is unpleasant, practice refusing to hate them and practice refusing to let them in. Hold both at the same time. Let your heart stay clean and let your boundaries stay strong. Because that's the level of mastery we're aiming for here. Not the kind where you win the argument, but the kind where you keep your inner world intact. And when you can do that consistently, something changes. People don't just stop bothering you. You stop being bothered by the kind of person who used to control your mood. 7. Turn the annoying person into a training partner. At some point, if you want this to become permanent, you have to stop treating irritation like a glitch in life and start treating it like part of the curriculum. Because if your peace only exists when everyone behaves nicely, then your peace isn't real. It's conditional. It depends on luck. And luck is not a strategy. Stoicism is a strategy. This is where the idea behind amor fati, loving your fate, becomes practical, not poetic. It doesn't mean you enjoy bad behavior. It means you stop wasting energy wishing reality were different, and you start using reality to build strength. Marcus Aurelius wrote one of the toughest lines ever for this. The obstacle becomes the way, not as a slogan, but as a mental habit. The very thing that blocks you becomes the thing that trains you. The annoying person becomes a tool. The delay becomes a drill. The disrespect becomes a test of your self-command. Now I want you to hear this carefully because it changes the entire emotional equation. The person who bothers you is not just a problem. They are a sparring partner, And in sparring, you don't hate the person for throwing punches. You don't collapse emotionally because you got tapped. You learn. You adjust. You become harder to hit. You become calmer under pressure. The whole point of sparring is to experience stress in a controlled environment so that when the real fight comes, your body doesn't panic. Life is doing the same thing to you every day. It keeps sending small, safe doses of friction so you can either evolve or stay reactive. This is why people who never train their mind become fragile. They interpret every annoyance as an attack, every criticism as humiliation, every delay as personal sabotage. But a trained person sees the same events and thinks, okay, here's my rep, here's my set, here's my practice. That mindset doesn't make you cold, it makes you stable. So how do you actually use this in real life without turning it into fake positivity? You do it by asking one question the moment you feel bothered. What is this here to train in me? Not, why is this happening to me? That question makes you a victim and keeps you angry. The better question is, what quality is this forcing me to practice? Maybe it's patience. Maybe it's restraint. Maybe it's humility. Maybe it's clarity. Maybe it's the ability to set a boundary without heat. Maybe it's the ability to disengage without needing the last word. In that moment, the situation stops being about your ego, and it becomes about your craft. And here's the part people rarely admit. A lot of anger is the hunger to dominate the moment, to control the narrative, to make sure you're not disrespected. But your real power isn't in dominating the moment. Your real power is in choosing who you become in the moment. Because the outside world will always be unpredictable, your character doesn't have to be. Let's make it concrete. Someone tries to provoke you in a conversation. They speak with sarcasm. They push. They test. Your old self thinks, I can't let this slide. Your trained self thinks, perfect. Here's my practice. Practice what? Practice responding slowly. Practice speaking calmly. Practice letting silence do the heavy lifting. Practice refusing to rush. Practice refusing to argue with someone who is arguing emotionally, not logically. And if a boundary needs to be set, you set it without anger. If you keep speaking like that, I'm ending this conversation. Then you actually do it. No lecture, no explosion, just consequence. That's a sparring partner mindset in action. You use the moment to build discipline, not drama. There's also a deeper psychological benefit to this reframe. It steals the villain energy from the other person. When you see them as a training partner, they lose the power to cast themselves as the center of your emotional universe. They become a weight in your gym, useful, heavy, temporary. You don't carry the weight home and keep lifting it all night in your head. You put it down. You walk away stronger. So here's the challenge for today, and it's the kind that creates a permanent shift if you actually commit to it. The next time someone annoys you, don't call them an enemy. Call them a drill. Call them a rep. In your head, say, this is my training partner. Then choose one skill to practice in that moment. Slower speech, calmer tone, silence, restraint, clear boundary, or letting it go. One skill. One rep. And if you do that consistently, you'll notice something almost strange. The world doesn't have to get nicer for you to become calmer. People don't have to change for you to become unshakable, because you stop waiting for a perfect environment and you start building a perfect inner response. And that's when your peace becomes real. 8. The view from above. Shrink the moment before it shrinks you. When you're angry, your world becomes tiny. It collapses down to a single sentence someone said, a single look, a single delay, a single problem that suddenly feels like it's the center of your existence. That's why anger is so exhausting, because it steals your sense of scale. It convinces you that this moment is bigger than it is, that this person has more power than they do, that this inconvenience is a personal attack instead of what it usually is, life being life. Marcus Aurelius had a simple antidote for that mental tunnel vision, and it's one of the most underrated skills in Stoicism. Step back until the moment can't lie to you anymore. He trained himself to zoom out, to see his life in the context of the city, the empire, the world, time itself. And when you do that, truly do it, not as a cliché, the anger starts to lose oxygen. Not because the situation becomes good, but because it becomes correctly sized. So picture this with me, not as fantasy, but as a discipline you can run in 10 seconds. You're in the room, in the car, in the conversation, and you feel that familiar heat building, the urge to correct, to defend, to prove, to win. Now, pull your awareness upward as if you're lifting a camera. You see the room from above, then the building, then the street, then the city with its millions of private dramas happening at the same time. People rushing, people grieving, people falling in love, people making mistakes, people trying their best and failing in quiet ways. Then the coastline, the weather systems, the slow rotation of the planet that has been turning through wars and celebrations without pausing for anyone's ego. And then, for one breath, you remember the simplest truth. This moment is not the universe. It's a scene, a small scene, and you are allowed to act inside it without becoming it. This does something powerful to the part of you that gets hooked by disrespect, because disrespect is only lethal when your identity is fragile in that moment. When you zoom out, you stop reacting like someone protecting an image, and you start responding like someone protecting a life. You realize how strange it is to trade your peace, your one finite day, for a fleeting provocation. You realize how often anger is just you defending a story about yourself that doesn't even deserve that much energy. And here's the part that makes this technique more than a calming visualization. It turns winning into the wrong goal. When your perspective expands, the real victory becomes obvious. The victory is keeping your mind clear. The victory is not letting a random person rent space in your nervous system. The victory is walking away with your character intact. Because in a wider frame, you can finally see what anger is trying to do. It's trying to make the moment feel urgent enough that you abandon your standards. And that's the trade you regret later, every time. So use this as a decision tool. When you're bothered, ask yourself quietly and honestly, will this matter in a week? If yes, handle it with clarity. If no, why are you paying for it with your peace today? Then go one step deeper, because this is where the Stoic steel shows up. Will I be proud of how I respond to this? That question doesn't require you to be perfect. It just asks you to stay loyal to the person you're trying to become. Now let me make this practical in a way you can actually remember. When the trigger happens, don't fight the feeling first. Shrink the moment first. Tell yourself, zoom out. That's it. 2 words. Then follow it with one sentence that brings you back to reality. This is smaller than my peace. Not smaller than your ego, smaller than your peace. Because your peace is not just comfort. Your peace is the foundation of your judgment, your focus, your ability to make good decisions, your ability to be someone you respect. And when you protect it, you don't just feel better, you live better. Here's the challenge for today. The next time you feel yourself getting pulled into anger, run the view from above for one breath, then ask one clean question before you speak or react. Is this worth shrinking my life to this size? If the answer is no, let it be no completely. No half anger, no replaying it later, no carrying it into the next hour. Just no. Because when you can expand your perspective on command, you stop being trapped inside the moment, and the moment stops being able to trap you. 9. Decide what your attention is worth and stop paying for petty things. There's a quiet truth about anger that almost nobody wants to admit. Most of it is a budgeting problem, not a morals problem, not a personality problem, a budgeting problem. You're spending something priceless, your attention, your time, your mental energy, on things that are not worth the price. And every time you do it, you teach your mind a dangerous lesson, that random people, random problems, and random moods get to decide the quality of your day. Seneca, when he writes about how short life feels, is basically warning you that the real tragedy isn't death, it's waste. Not just wasted hours, but wasted inner life, wasted peace, wasted clarity, because you don't get a refund on your attention. You don't get those minutes back. And if you're honest, anger is one of the fastest ways to burn time without building anything. You can lose 30 minutes to a single comment. You can lose an entire evening replaying a conversation you can't change. You can lose a full day because one person was careless. That's not strength. That's being pickpocketed in public and calling it normal. So, this lesson is about making your mind more expensive. The reason some people are impossible to bother isn't because life is easier for them. It's because they have a strict policy about what earns their attention. They don't open the gates for everything. They don't treat every irritation like an emergency. They don't give every provocateur an audience. And this is one of the most practical forms of self-respect you can build. Deciding, ahead of time, what is worthy of your emotional energy and what is beneath it. Here's the line that changes everything when you really feel it. Every minute you're angry is a minute you gave away. You gave it to a stranger. You gave it to an event. You gave it to someone you might not even like. Someone you might never see again. Someone who doesn't even know they stole it. And that's why anger is such a bad deal. It's a donation to the unworthy. Now, people often think the solution is to not care, but the Stoic move is more precise than that. You still care about what matters, your values, your work, your family, your mission, your health, your character. You just stop caring about things that don't deserve a seat at that table. You stop letting pettiness compete with purpose. So make it practical with a simple calculation, and I want you to actually run this in your head the next time you feel bothered. Ask yourself, what is the price of my peace? And then ask, is this worth paying it? Because you are paying it either way. If you react, you pay in stress. You pay in mental noise. You pay in regret. You pay in the aftertaste of losing control. And what do you get in return? Maybe a moment of satisfaction. Maybe the feeling that you won. But most of the time you don't even win. You just extend the drama. You just keep the door open to a person who shouldn't even have a key. And once you start thinking this way, something changes. You stop asking, am I right? And you start asking, is this worth my attention? You stop asking, how do I prove my point? And you start asking, what do I want my mind to look like an hour from now? You start respecting your focus like it's a limited resource, because it is. Marcus Aurelius had a style of thinking that fits perfectly here. He constantly returns to the idea that your mind is yours to govern, and that you can choose what you allow into it. In modern language, it's like saying, you are the editor of your attention. Not everything gets published. Not every thought gets airtime. Not every insult becomes a headline. And that editorial power is what turns you from reactive to sovereign. So here's the practice I want you to adopt, because it's simple, and it will change your temperament if you do it consistently. When something bothers you, imagine there is a fortress around your peace, not a dramatic medieval fantasy, just a simple rule. The drawbridge only lowers for threats that are real and problems that matter. Everything else stays outside. The rude driver, outside. The snide comment, outside. The petty misunderstanding, outside. Not because you're weak, but because you refuse to trade your inner stability for cheap drama. Your peace is not fragile. It's guarded. And here's the important part. Guarding your peace doesn't mean avoiding confrontation forever. It means you handle issues from clarity. If something truly matters, a real boundary, a serious disrespect, a meaningful conflict, you address it cleanly, calmly, directly. But you don't let irritation trick you into treating everything as a 5-alarm fire. You learn the difference between this is important and this is loud. Because loud problems are often small. Important problems are often quiet. Anger tends to chase loudness. Wisdom protects importance. So the challenge for today is this. The next time you feel anger rising, ask yourself one question before you react. Is this worth buying with my attention? If it's not worth it, don't pay, don't negotiate, don't half pay, and carry it later. Just don't pay. Redirect your focus to what you actually care about. Your work, your body, your mission, your people, your quiet growth. Because when your attention becomes expensive, fewer things can afford to disturb you, and life starts to feel calmer, not because the world changed, but because you stopped handing your power away for free. 10. The Evening Review. How you become unbothered for life. If you want this to stop being a temporary mood and become a permanent identity, you need one thing that most people never build: a private relationship with your own standards. Because the truth is, you won't change just because you listened to an episode and felt inspired for an hour. You change when you start watching yourself with honesty, without hatred, without excuses, and you correct the pattern while it's still small. That's what the Stoics were doing. They weren't collecting quotes. They were collecting evidence about themselves. Seneca describes a practice that sounds simple, almost too plain to be powerful, but it's one of the most effective methods ever created for emotional control. At the end of the day, review your conduct. Not like a judge who wants to punish you, but like a craftsman who wants to improve the work. Because anger thrives in the dark. It thrives when you never confront your own pattern. It thrives when every outburst gets explained away as "they deserved it," or "I was tired," or "that's just how I am." The Evening Review breaks that spell. It forces you to see yourself as someone you're shaping. And what's beautiful about doing it at night is that it gives you closure. Most people carry the day into the night, and the night into the next day. They replay the argument while brushing their teeth. They relive the disrespect while trying to sleep. They imagine what they should have said. And that mental replay is like keeping the fire alive with your own breath. The Evening Review turns replay into learning. It turns chaos into a lesson with edges. It takes the energy and puts it to work. So, here's how it works. And you don't need a notebook. You don't need a ritual. You just need a few minutes of honesty. Before sleep, ask yourself 3 questions, slowly, like you actually want the answer. The first question is, where did I give away my peace today? Not where you were right. Not where the other person was wrong. Where did you let something outside you control something inside you? Where did you let irritation steal your voice, your tone, your patience, your focus? And be specific, not "I was annoyed." Say, "I got hooked when that person dismissed me," or "I lost control when the plan changed," or I kept replaying that comment for 2 hours. The second question is, what story did I believe? Because that's the real engine, as you've seen through this whole episode. Anger is usually powered by a sentence in your head. They're disrespecting me. I'm being treated unfairly. I can't let this slide. This shouldn't happen to me. Identify the sentence. Don't argue with it yet. Just name it. The moment you name it, you stop being inside it. And the third question is, what would the calm version of me do next time? Not the perfect version, not the saint, the calm version. The version who still has a backbone, still has standards, still sets boundaries, but does it with control. Then give yourself one clear adjustment for tomorrow. 1, not 10. One small correction that's realistic under pressure. Maybe it's the 3-second pause before replying. Maybe it's refusing to argue when your body is hot. Maybe it's ending conversations earlier. Maybe it's shrinking the moment with the view from above. Maybe it's removing the story and sticking to camera truth. One adjustment. Now, there's a deeper reason this works that people don't talk about enough. It rewires your identity. When you review your day, you're telling your brain, this matters. I'm paying attention to who I'm becoming. And the brain changes what it knows you're tracking. If you track your anger, it becomes harder for your anger to hide. If you track your reactions start to slow down. If you track your choices, you start choosing more deliberately. This isn't magic. It's training. It's the same way anything improves. Attention plus repetition. And this is where you step into a different kind of power. Not the loud power of winning arguments, but the quiet power of not being controllable. Because when you practice this for weeks, you start to notice something that feels almost unreal. The same triggers show up, but they hit differently. The rude person doesn't stick to you. The delay doesn't poison your mood. The disrespect doesn't force you to prove anything. You still see it. You still register it. But it doesn't take you. It doesn't pull you into a smaller version of yourself. So here's the challenge for tonight. And I want it to be simple enough that you actually do it. Before you sleep, ask yourself, where did I lose my temper today, even slightly? Then ask, what did I believe in that moment? Then decide, tomorrow, what is one thing I will do differently? One thing. Make it clean. Make it real. Make it small enough to survive a stressful day. Because the unbothered life is not built in one breakthrough. It's built the way a fortress is built, stone by stone. Choice by choice. Day by day. And one evening at a time, you stop being the kind of person the world can easily provoke. And you become the kind of person who stays calm, not because life is easy, but because your mind is finally yours. And when you fall asleep with that kind of self-command, you wake up stronger. If you've listened this far, I want you to notice something important. The goal was never to live in a world where nobody is rude, where nothing goes wrong, where traffic is perfect, where every conversation feels respectful, where life stops testing you. That world doesn't exist. The goal is to live in the real world without letting the real world invade you. Because the deepest form of power isn't being feared. It isn't having the last word. It isn't proving you're right. The deepest form of power is being hard to move. It's having an inner life that doesn't get hijacked by random people and random moments. It's the ability to feel the spark of irritation and still choose a response you'll respect. That's what the Stoics were building. Marcus writing reminders to himself in the middle of responsibility. Seneca warning that anger destroys the one who holds it. Epictetus reminding you that the event is not the tyrant. Your judgment is. And once you see that clearly, You stop treating anger like destiny, and you start treating it like a habit, something trained and therefore something untrained. So here's what I want you to do now, not as motivation but as a decision. Pick one lesson from this episode and make it your rule for the next 24 hours. Maybe it's the 3-second pause. Maybe it's separating the event from the story. Maybe it's expecting friction so you stop being shocked by it. Maybe it's refusing to pay attention to petty things. Keep it simple. Keep it real. And when the next trigger shows up, and it will, treat it like your training moment, not your downfall. And if you slip, don't turn that into another excuse for self-hate. The Stoic path is not perfection. It's progress with honesty. It's the quiet courage to look at yourself, correct the pattern, and try again without drama. That's how a person becomes unbothered. Not by winning one big battle, but by winning 100 small moments where you could have lost yourself. And you didn't. If this helped you, support the channel by liking and subscribing, and share this episode with someone who's tired of being controlled by anger. But more importantly, take your peace seriously. Treat it like something sacred. Because the moment you stop giving your inner world away for free, you don't just get calmer, you get your life back.